Robert Duvall watched a young actor imitate him for 90 minutes from the back of a Manhattan theater, and then did something that nobody who knew about the imitation expected. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't send a letter. He waited at the stage door, introduced himself, and said one thing that the young actor has quoted in every interview he has given since. It was a Thursday evening in October 2009, and the theater was a 94-seat black box on West 42nd Street called the Meridian Stage, the kind of venue that exists in a permanent state of ambitious underfunding and that produces, in that condition, some of the most honest work happening in American theater at any given time. The show was a one-man piece called American Silence, written by and starring a 26-year-old actor named Marcus Webb, who had been developing it for 2 years in workshops and staged readings and the specific iterative process by which a solo performance piece discovers what it is. The development process had taken Marcus Webb through 3 workshops, 2 staged readings, and a 2-week run at a festival in Edinburgh the previous summer where the piece had received attention that was encouraging without being definitive. The specific kind of response that tells a performer their work is on the right track, without confirming that it has arrived at its destination. He had come back from Edinburgh with the sense that the show needed something he had not yet found, and he had spent the autumn trying to find it. What American Silence was, by the time it opened in October 2009, was a 78-minute portrait of 4 different men: a country musician, a small-town sheriff, a Korean War veteran, and a Texas oil worker, each of whom Marcus Webb had built from the ground up through research and observation and the specific craft of physical and vocal transformation that serious character work requires. The 4 men were fictional. The performance style was not. Anyone with a comprehensive knowledge of Robert Duvall's work would have recognized it within the first 10 minutes. The 4 characters Marcus Webb had created were not Duvall characters. They were original people with original histories and original circumstances. But the language in which they were rendered, the physical grammar, the vocal architecture, the specific quality of the internal life that surfaced in the body's smallest decisions, was a language assembled from decades of watching Robert Duvall work. It was a translation, not a copy. But the original text was unmistakable. The economy of gesture, the specific quality of stillness that preceded action. The voice, not an imitation of Duvall's actual voice, but something that had been assembled from the patterns of Duvall's vocal work across decades, the rhythm and weight and placement that were as characteristic as a fingerprint. Marcus Webb had spent 2 years studying Robert Duvall, not to replicate him, but to learn from him, and the learning had gone so deep that it was now inseparable from what Marcus Webb did on a stage. A friend of Duvall's who had seen an earlier workshop production had mentioned American Silence to him in September, over dinner in the city, in the offhand way of someone who has thought about whether to bring something up and has decided the information is worth passing along without being certain what will be done with it. The friend was a director who had worked with Duvall twice and who had known him long enough to trust his judgment about what he could receive without it becoming a problem. He had said, "There's a young actor downtown doing something with your work that you should probably see." He had said it and then moved to another topic, which was the correct instinct, because Duvall was not a man who needed to be persuaded of things he had already decided, in the casual way of someone passing along information they think will be interesting rather than actionable. The friend had said, "There's a young actor downtown doing something with your work that you should probably see." He had not specified what the something was, or why Duvall should probably see it. Duvall had bought a single ticket online under his own name for a Thursday evening performance. He had done this without particular deliberation. The friend's description had produced in him the specific low-grade curiosity that he had learned, over a long career, to take seriously when it arose, because it rarely arose without reason. He did not know what he was going to find. He bought the ticket, wrote the date in his notebook, and let the question of what it would be sit until Thursday. He had not told anyone he was going. He had found a seat in the back row of the 94-seat house, in the corner where the house lighting barely reached, and he had settled in with the patient, unhurried attention he brought to most things he decided were worth his time. He had understood what he was looking at within the first 4 minutes, and he had sat with this understanding for the remaining 74 without moving to any conclusion about it, The understanding itself was interesting and required time. He had never, in 50 years of working in this industry, watched someone perform a sustained character study built primarily from the materials of his own work. The experience was not what he would have predicted it would be, which was itself interesting. What followed, the remaining 74 minutes of the performance, was the experience of watching a young actor work in a tradition that had been built, largely, from the study of Duvall's own work. It was not comfortable, exactly, and it was not flattering in the ordinary sense, and it was not the kind of experience that admitted of a simple response. It was, Duvall thought, watching something that had been made from him, taken apart carefully, studied at the component level, and reconstructed as something new, which was not the same as imitation, even though it looked like imitation from the outside. It was, he thought, craft. The specific, serious, unglamorous craft of someone who has identified a way of working that they want to understand completely and has pursued that understanding through the only method that actually produces it: repetition, attention, and the willingness to do the work badly for long enough that doing it well becomes possible. Duvall had done this himself with other people's work in his 20s. He recognized it from the inside. At intermission, American silence had a single 10-minute break at the midpoint. Duvall remained in his seat. Several people around him went to the lobby. He sat in the corner of the back row and looked at the empty stage. He had not decided yet what to do. He knew, in a general way, the range of available responses. The legal response, which he considered and set aside immediately because it was not proportionate to what he was watching. The public response, which he considered and set aside because it would make more of the situation than the situation warranted. And the private response, which he had not yet worked out, but which felt closer to correct than the others. He decided during the second half. The decision did not arrive as a dramatic realization. It arrived as the slow crystallization of something he had been thinking about for 74 minutes, about what it meant to watch someone learn from your work, and what the appropriate response to that learning was, and whether the appropriate response was different depending on whether the learning had been done well or poorly. It had been done well. That mattered. It changed what was owed. Marcus Webb came out through the stage door at 10:42, still in the process of shedding the specific concentrated energy of a solo performance. The decompression that happens when a person who has been carrying an entire show alone for 78 minutes is finally released from the weight of it. He was 26 years old, lean, dark-haired, wearing the plain clothes that actors wear when they are done being someone else and have not yet fully returned to being themselves. He looked up and saw Robert Duvall standing by the stage door. He stopped. He stood there for what several people who witnessed the moment later agreed was approximately 30 seconds, during which he did not speak and did not move, and appeared to be engaged in some internal process of verifying that what he was seeing was what he was seeing. Then he said, "Oh." It was not an eloquent response. It was the response of a 26-year-old who has just processed something that his preparation had not included. Duvall offered his hand. Marcus Webb shook it. "You were in there," Marcus said. It came out as a statement and a question simultaneously. "The whole thing," Duvall said. Marcus Webb looked at him. "I have to tell you," Marcus started, in the tone of someone preparing to explain something complicated about copyright and influence and the nature of artistic borrowing. The explanation he had rehearsed in his head for 2 years against the possibility of exactly this conversation. "You don't have to tell me anything," Duvall said. "I watched the show." Marcus stopped. "What did you think?" he asked. He asked it the way a 26-year-old asks the question they most need the answer to and are most afraid of, directly, without the protective scaffolding of indirection. Duvall looked at him for a moment. "You've learned the outside," he said. "The shape of the thing, the tempo, the weight, the way a body holds itself in a scene." He paused. "That's the work you've done. It's real work, and you've done it well." Another pause. "Now forget it." Marcus Webb looked at him. "Forget it?" he said. He said it in the way of someone checking whether they have heard something correctly rather than challenging whether it was right. "All of it," Duvall said. "You learned how I do it. Now you know how I do it. That knowledge lives in your body now. Stop thinking about it. Go find how you do it. He paused one final time. That's where the real work starts. He shook Marcus Webb's hand again. He walked away from the stage door on West 42nd Street and into the October night without looking back, in the way he left most places, without the performance of departure, without the lingering that signals the desire to be seen leaving. He had said what he came to say. The evening was complete. Marcus Webb stood outside the Meridian stage for a while after he left. The October night was cold in the specific way of New York October, the cold that arrives after 10, and the people who live in the city know as the beginning of something rather than the end of something else. The stage door light was yellow and inadequate. The sounds of 42nd Street were continuous and indifferent. The other cast members, American Silence, had a production team of 5 and a crew of 4, came out and found him there and asked what had happened, and he told them, and they stood with him in the October night in the specific way of people who have just been adjacent to something significant. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. By the account of the production stage manager, who was the last person out the stage door and who witnessed the final 30 seconds of it, the two men shook hands twice, once at the beginning and once at the end, and the exchange had the quality of something concluded rather than something interrupted. The stage manager said that Marcus Webb was standing very still when Duvall walked away, in the specific stillness of someone whose internal state is too full to allow for movement. Marcus Webb has been working as an actor for 15 years, since that Thursday evening in October 2009. He has appeared in 12 films and 7 theater productions. He has given, in the course of those 15 years, a great many interviews about his work and his process and the influences that shaped his approach to character. He quotes the stage door conversation in nearly all of them, always in the same words, always with the same pause before the final sentence, a pause that audiences and journalists have noted and that Marcus himself has described as not performed but involuntary, as if the body still remembers the moment of receiving the thing and replicates the stillness each time the words are spoken. He quotes the specific words, "You've learned the outside, now forget it, go find how you do it," and he quotes them precisely in the order they were said, because the order matters. The first sentence named what he had done. The second sentence was the permission. The third sentence was the instruction. Together they constituted, in 3 sentences, the most useful note anyone had ever given him about his own work, because they are the words that changed the direction of his work at the moment when his work most needed to change direction. He had spent 2 years learning to do something that someone else had already done. The stage door conversation was the moment he understood that this was preparation, not destination. He has never performed a show like American Silence again. Not because the technique was wrong, and not because the experience of the stage door conversation closed off that direction, but because the stage door conversation opened a different one, and the different one has been where his work has lived ever since. His subsequent theater work has been described by critics as intensely personal, rooted in a quality of interior specificity that distinguishes it from most contemporary character work. In a 2021 interview, a journalist asked him whether he had ever reached out to Duvall again after that night. Marcus Webb smiled. "I sent him a letter," he said, "about 6 months later, when I understood what he'd actually told me. I thanked him." The journalist asked if Duvall had responded. "He sent me a note," Marcus said, 3 words. The journalist asked what they were. Marcus Webb smiled again. He's never said what they were. He's been asked in 4 subsequent interviews and has declined each time in the pleasant but absolute way of someone who has decided that this particular thing belongs to him and intends to keep it. If this story reminded you that the highest form of teaching is knowing when to tell someone to stop looking at you and start looking at themselves, subscribe, leave a comment, and hit the notification bell. More stories about what it really means to be Robert Duvall are coming every single week.